Welcome to part 3 of the Ultimate True Crime Iceberg series. In this series, we deep dive into true crime cases, in particular, those in which the victims paid the ultimate price: the slaying of Ronaldo John Rivera. In the early 1980s, the city of Santa Fe, New Mexico was shaken by the tragic end of Father Ronaldo John Rivera. Born in Santa Fe in 1924, Father Ronaldo was a devoted priest, deeply embedded in his community. Ordained in 1953, he was later appointed rector of St. Francis Cathedral in 1975, where he remained until his untimely demise in 1982. The events leading to Father Ronaldo's demise began on the evening of August 5, 1982, when he received a call at his rectory from a man claiming that his grandfather needed last rites near a rest stop in Waldo. Father Ronaldo drove to the location, but never returned. 2 days later, his body was discovered in a field near the La Bajada rest stop, marked by a gunshot wound and evidence of strangulation. Despite a thorough investigation, including examining fingerprints found in his abandoned car and a psychological profile developed by the FBI, the identity of his assailants remained a mystery. George Semkus, a suspect linked to the case, was arrested but never charged with the crime due to insufficient evidence, leaving questions around Father Ronaldo's demise unanswered. Semkus was previously accused of having stolen from Rivera's cathedral, and some theorize that this led to Semkus coming for Rivera. Complicating matters further, the slaying and disappearance of other priests during the same period added layers of mystery to an already perplexing situation. Most famously, there was the disappearance and presumed death of Reverend John Patrick Kerrigan in Montana 2 years later, under eerily similar circumstances. The similarities between the two cases fueled theories of a possible connection. Kerrigan's past, which included time spent in New Mexico, raised questions about a potential link between the two men. However, law enforcement has remained divided on whether the two incidents were connected, and no conclusive evidence has been presented to link the cases definitively. Further, there's the theory that Kerrigan, unlike Rivera, was not actually ended, but rather that Kerrigan left of his own accord to dodge accusations of unnatural activities with minors. The Cape Town paid companionship worker killer. This is a suggestion from community member Anna Mart Rowland. Thanks so much for this suggestion. The Cape Town paid companionship worker killer, also known as the Cape Town Strangler, was an unidentified individual responsible for the tragic end of 16 women in Cape Town. This serial slayer was active from at least 1992 to 1996, though of course he may have plied his cruel trade elsewhere as well. The criminal's method involved picking up victims on rainy nights, ending their lives via strangulation within his vehicle, and disposing of their bodies in pre-selected locations. This pattern was consistent across all cases, with the attacker ensuring the victims were left in varying locations to avoid detection. One unique aspect of these cases was that the criminal attempted to stage the crime scenes, posing victims to mislead investigations. Notably, none of the women were subject to indecent assaults prior to their slayings. This detail, among others, led to difficulties in linking the crimes directly to one individual. The case remains unsolved at present. The police did make an arrest and charge in relation to one of the slayings. However, for reasons that are about to be abundantly clear, I'm not going to repeat this man's name here. The police released this man due to lack of evidence, and it was later found that the authorities falsified the evidence against him in an attempt to tie him to the crime. In my view, this attempt to frame an innocent man for the slayings has likely completely botched any chance of a conviction of the actual killer, given that the actual killer left no DNA. However, that said, there is a description of the perpetrator, though admittedly the description is very vague. According to an interview with a survivor, The individual was a well-put-together white male in his 20s or 30s and appeared to be a professional of some sort. The Nggerkot Massacre. The Nggerkot incident occurred on December 14, 2005, at the Kali Devi temple near Nggerkot in Nepal. It resulted in significant loss and injury. 11 individuals lost their lives, and 19 others were injured. The incident unfolded around 11:30 p.m. when Basudev Thapa, a 26-year-old off-duty Royal Nepalese Army sergeant, initiated the tragic events. Thapa had a confrontation with youths from the nearby Pipalbot village, with whom he had long-standing issues. After an altercation where he was reportedly assaulted, Thapa left the scene only to return armed with a semi-automatic rifle. Despite being off-duty, he managed to leave his barracks with the weapon without being stopped, which was against protocol. Importantly, he also got reinforcements, 3 fellow soldiers, to come along with him. Once they arrived back, Thapa then fired shots indiscriminately at villagers who were attending a celebration at the temple. The initial reports stated that Thapa ended his own life following the spree. However, there were discrepancies regarding his death. Witnesses claimed that he was shot by one of his colleagues while he was still firing at the civilians. Also, witnesses claimed that they had seen the other soldiers fire at civilians as well. An examination of Thapa's body later suggested that he could not have self-inflicted the fatal chest wound, contradicting the official narrative that he had acted alone and ended himself. In the aftermath, there was significant outcry and demands for a thorough investigation, compounded by actions from the army that appeared to involve cleaning the crime scene. The families of the victims protested, and an official inquiry was set up. However, the results were questionable. The official report concluded that Thapa had acted alone and labeled his death as self-inflicted, despite conflicting witness statements and evidence suggesting otherwise. A popular quote-unquote conspiracy theory is that all 4 of the soldiers were shooting, with Thapa being executed and used as a scapegoat by the others and the Nepalese military. The disappearance of Lisa Lynn Bishop. Lisa Lynn Bishop, a young woman from Atlanta, Georgia, vanished without a trace in 1988. She had plans to travel to Haiti aboard a freighter named the Free Dawn, under the command of a mysterious German man known as Florian Meyer-Borch. Lisa was an aspiring journalist and reportedly took this trip to gather material for a story. However, she never returned, and no one has heard from her since. The Free Dawn, the vessel Lisa was supposed to travel on, adds a layer of mystery to her disappearance. There are conflicting reports about the ship's journey, its condition, and even whether that is the correct name of the ship. The Free Dawn departed from Miami on December 17, 1988, with a crew consisting of Florian, Lisa, and 7 Haitians, of whom nothing has been reported on. This would be the last time Lisa, the ship, the captain, or the crew were seen. Some sources claim that the Free Dawn was seen in Miami or around the Caribbean after Lisa's disappearance, but these sightings have not been conclusively verified. Florian Meyer-Borch, the captain with whom Lisa was last known to be, is another figure shrouded in ambiguity. Efforts to locate and question him following Lisa's disappearance yielded little information. His connection to the case is a critical element. However, his whereabouts and potential involvement remains largely unexplained. The last confirmed sighting of Florian was on Grand Cayman, circa early 1989. However, Lisa was not spotted with him, heightening concerns. The investigation into Lisa's disappearance faced numerous challenges. The international nature of her travel plan, involving a trip to Haiti, complicated jurisdictional and investigative efforts. Several theories have been proposed regarding Lisa's fate. Some speculate that she may have fallen victim to foul play, possibly related to the individuals she was with or the places she intended to visit. Others suggest the possibility of an accident, a deliberate disappearance, or even sinister allegations of human trafficking. However, without concrete evidence, these theories remain speculative. While researching this case, one thing struck me. Everyone simply accepts that Lisa got on a boat in Miami. However, as far as I can tell, there are no witnesses who actually saw her get on the boat. My own hypothesis is that she may never have even made it to the boat, and that she may have been slain on the trip to the supposed boat. The Danny Casolaro mystery. Danny Casolaro, an investigative journalist, was found dead in a hotel bathtub in 1991, under circumstances that sparked widespread suspicion and controversy. His death occurred amidst his investigation into a network he called the Octopus, deepening the mystery. Casolaro was investigating a complex web of alleged criminal activities involving high-level government officials, intelligence agencies, and private corporations. His focus was on the Inns Law affair, involving the potentially illegal redistribution of software called Promise. Inns Law and Casolaro alleged that the Department of Justice stole Promise from Inns Law, installed a backdoor in the software, and distributed it to foreign nations. According to the allegations, this allowed the American government to spy on these nations in various capacities through the backdoor function. Casolaro believed that the Inns Law case was a part of a larger conspiracy, which he termed the Octopus. This investigation led him across various facets of corruption, including arms dealing and espionage. In early August 1991, Casolaro told his family he was close to concluding his investigation and would be traveling to Martinsburg, West Virginia, to meet a key source. His optimism and determination seemed undiminished. According to reports, he met several individuals in Martinsburg, though their identities remain largely unconfirmed. However, at least one of these people is thought to have been an intelligence operative. Casolaro's family and friends reported he had received threatening messages and warned them that if something happened to him, it would not be an accident. On August 10, 1991, Casolaro was found dead in his hotel room's bathtub with his wrists slashed multiple times. The scene was quickly ruled a self-ending by local authorities, but several unusual factors cast doubt on this conclusion. His research papers and notes were missing from the hotel room. The room's carpet was wet, and there were no fingerprints, not even his own. The missing documents, which he claimed would expose the alleged conspiracy, were never recovered. The absence of fingerprints and the presence of an unidentified hair and bloodstain in the bathtub added to the ambiguity. Furthermore, his family stated that Casolaro was not known to have any such mental health struggles. The investigation into Casolaro's death faced several challenges, including alleged mishandling by local police and the FBI's initial reluctance to get involved. Theories about his death range from him being silenced to prevent exposure of the Octopus to being a victim of his own web of conspiracy theories. Some speculate that he may have been misled or manipulated by sources with their own agendas. And if all that wasn't enough to convince you that he may have been onto something, at his funeral, a limousine pulled up. A military officer exited, approached Dany's coffin, and put a medal on the coffin, saluted, and left the scene. The slaying of Charles Morgan. The death of Charles Morgan, a Tucson-based escrow agent, involves highly suspect circumstances. Morgan's story begins on March 22, 1977, when he disappeared from his home in Tucson, Arizona, only to reappear 3 days later in a state that sparked widespread speculation and concern. Upon his return, Morgan was in a distressed condition, unable to speak and wearing handcuffs. He communicated to his wife, Ruth, through written notes, explaining that he had been kidnapped and subjected to a traumatic ordeal that involved being physically harmed to prevent him from speaking. He indicated that his vocal cords had been temporarily damaged by a drug that was administered to him during his captivity. Morgan also insisted that his family was in danger and that they shouldn't contact the police under any circumstances, suggesting the involvement of a powerful criminal organization. For the next 2 months, Morgan lived under a self-imposed state of high alert. He took to wearing a bulletproof vest, carried a weapon for self-defense, and drove his daughters to and from school. Despite these precautions, Morgan vanished again on June 7, 1977. This time, he would not return home alive. His body was discovered on June 18th in the desert near Tucson. The circumstances of his death were peculiar and troubling. He had been shot once in the back of the head with his own .357 Magnum, which was found near his body. Despite the scene initially suggesting a case of ending by his own hand, several aspects of the case suggested foul play. Morgan was wearing his bulletproof vest at the time of his death, an unusual choice if he had planned to end himself. Also, and I can't get into too much detail on YouTube, but the location of the gunshot wound and the positioning of the body raised doubts about the possibility of a consensual shot. Additionally, a pair of sunglasses not belonging to Morgan was found at the scene, and a $2 bill was discovered inside his underwear. This bill was marked with 7 Spanish names and a Bible verse. The meaning of this, if any, was never decoded. In the days following the discovery of his body, further revelations added layers of complexity to the case. Ruth Morgan, his widow, received a phone call from an anonymous woman claiming that Charles was alive and in hiding, but this claim never materialized into any concrete evidence of his survival. The investigation into Morgan's death uncovered his secret life. This secret life included allegations of money laundering, connections with organized crime, and covert work for the federal government. Morgan had allegedly confided in his attorney about receiving death threats related to his work, which involved large-scale financial transactions for unknown clients, possibly as part of a money laundering operation for the mob. The official investigation concluded with the ruling of Morgan's death was by his own hand. Many, including his family and private investigators, have found this hard to accept, given the odd circumstances surrounding his slaying. The cryptic clues he left behind, his apparent fear for his life, and his secretive activities suggested a more sinister explanation. However, this case doesn't end here. It's about to get a lot more unusual. A journalist was investigating the case and uncovered evidence on illicit gold and platinum transactions. After Devereaux appeared on Unsolved Mysteries to discuss this case, Doug Johnston, an individual who drove a near-identical car and bore a strong resemblance to Devereaux and worked across the street from Devereaux, was slain. And to tie it back to Danny Casolaro, Casolaro had reached out to Devereaux with information regarding this case prior to Casolaro's own untimely demise. Also stay tuned because later in this episode we'll be discussing the Doug Johnston slaying. Jimmy here, the YouTuber behind the Lazy Chill Zone channel. If you're enjoying my content, please do me a favor and hit the like and subscribe buttons and that notification bell. Also, consider signing up for a YouTube membership or the Patreon and joining the Discord community. The YouTube and Patreon memberships allow me to engage in less self-censorship. After all, your support can free me from concerns about demonetization. And trust me, when you hit on the sort of topics I hit on, demonetization is always a very real concern. The slaying of Anton. In the quiet farming town of Lyons, Nebraska, the case of Anton, a disabled woman, gained notoriety primarily due to the involvement of Gregory J. Webb, the town's police chief. Webb was convicted of causing Anton's demise and tampering with evidence. The story unfolded when Anton disappeared on December 15, 1986, and her body was discovered 12 days later, showing signs of severe harm. She was found 20 miles north of Lyons, having been shot 3 times and bearing additional injuries, which was particularly shocking given her vulnerability. Webb, who fled following the incident, had various interactions and sightings that eventually led to his capture. Before fleeing, he withdrew all the money from his savings account and exchanged his personal vehicle for another at a dealership. His eventual escape route took him through Central and South America before settling in Daytona Beach, Florida, under a new identity. His new life included altered documents and evasive measures whenever his identity came under scrutiny. His past finally caught up with him when an episode of Unsolved Mysteries featuring his case aired, leading to his identification and arrest by authorities in 1993, initiated by a former colleague's tip. After his arrest, Webb was returned to Nebraska, where he faced charges related to Anton's death. The complexities of the case and the evidence involved led to Webb accepting a plea of no contest to manslaughter, ultimately resulting in his release from prison in August 2002. While this case was solved, something about the resolution seems so inherently unsatisfactory for the taking of Anna's life. The Castration serial slayer. Between 1980 and 1986, a series of tragic events unfolded across at least 5 U.S. states, including Wyoming, Pennsylvania, Utah, Georgia, and Connecticut. Young men were kidnapped, shot in the back of the head, and then castrated post-mortem. This string of incidents, known as the Castration serial slayings, initially appeared to be unrelated due to the vast geographic spread of the crime scenes. By 1989, forensic evidence linked 2 of the victims through the use of the same revolver, suggesting a single individual's involvement in at least these cases, with the others likely related. The first suspected victim, 27-year-old Willard Edward Judd, was discovered in 1980 near Casper, Wyoming. Following him, Wayne Lee Reifendifer, Marty James Shook, an unidentified individual in Georgia, and Jack Franklin Andrews were found under similarly gruesome circumstances. Despite the brutality of these acts, and some investigative leads, including a suspect in San Francisco found with preserved male parts, the case remains cold. The case of the Castration serial slayings is particularly challenging due to the lack of conclusive evidence linking all the crimes conclusively to one perpetrator. Also, the passage of time creates extreme difficulties moving forward. Further, aside from the 2 cases mentioned, there is nothing to definitively tie these slayings together, aside from the removal of male parts. The death of Bruiser Brody. The tragic event that led to the demise of Frank Donald Goodish, famously known as Bruiser Brody, remains one of professional wrestling's darkest moments. On July 17, 1988, in Bayamon, Puerto Rico, Brody's life came to an untimely end, under circumstances that would stir controversy and unanswered questions for decades to come. The conflict that led to Brody's demise began in the locker room of a wrestling event. Brody was asked by fellow wrestler Jose Gonzalez, known in the ring as Invader One, to discuss business in the shower area away from the rest of the locker room. This meeting turned fatal when Gonzalez inflicted severe injuries on Brody. Despite the immediate chaos and the efforts of fellow wrestlers to get medical help, Brody succumbed to his injuries. The police investigation and subsequent trial of Jose Gonzalez were marred by a lack of cooperation from witnesses and logistical mishaps. One of the biggest quote-unquote logistical mishaps was the fact that the killing blade was never recovered. Key witnesses, including wrestlers who were present at the scene, received subpoenas too late, rendering their evidence moot as the jury had already reached a verdict. Gonzalez was acquitted of all charges, with the defense claiming he acted in self-defense. This outcome left many within the wrestling community and Brody's family seeking justice that seemed forever out of reach. The story of Bruiser Brody's life and the circumstances of his death have been recounted in various wrestling documentaries and articles. Yet, despite the passage of time, the complete truth of what happened in the locker room remains elusive. I anticipate that we will never have the truth of what happened in the locker room that fateful day. Jose Gonzalez was acquitted of the slaying and found to have acted in self-defense by a jury. Gonzalez has no incentive to ever say anything further, as whatever he says could be of no benefit to him and could only work against him. Further, Gonzalez continued to wrestle and enjoy a successful career in the Puerto Rican wrestling scene. Astonishingly, Jose Gonzalez only retired from wrestling in 2022 at the age of 74. The Kurt Sova case. Kurt Sova, a 17-year-old from Newburgh Heights, Ohio, vanished under mysterious circumstances in October 1981 before the discovery of his body days later. Known for his easygoing nature, Kurt's disappearance was out of character, sparking immediate concern. He was last seen alive attending a Halloween house party. According to his friend who he attended with, Kurt was drinking Everclear while he was there. When he didn't return home, his family launched a frantic search. The search for Kurt involved local authorities, friends, family, and community members. Despite extensive efforts, including scouring the neighborhood and nearby areas, no trace of him was found initially. The police investigation uncovered few leads, with party attendees providing limited and sometimes conflicting information. The lack of evidence and clues added a layer of frustration and mystery to the case. 5 days after his disappearance, Kurt's body was discovered in a ravine, a location previously searched, raising questions about the body's placement after the initial search. The autopsy revealed no clear cause of death, no signs of struggle, and minimal alcohol content in his system. This discovery only deepened the mystery, as the circumstances of his death seemed inexplicable, with medical examiners unable to determine how or why he died. Law enforcement faced criticism for their handling of the Kurt Sova case. The initial delay in treating his disappearance as serious and the subsequent inability to provide answers or a clear direction in the investigation led to public frustration. Over the years, the case remained open but inactive, with occasional reviews yielding no new clues. The slaying of Doug Johnston. The 1990 slaying of Doug Johnston in Phoenix, Arizona, is speculated to be related to the Charles Morgan case discussed previously in this video. Doug Johnston, a 27-year-old computer draftsman, was found dead in his car outside the electronics firm where he worked. The incident occurred on the night of May 14, 1990, leaving more questions than answers. Johnston was shot in the head, execution style, a brutal and sudden act that seemed to come out of nowhere. He was discovered in the early hours of May 15th in the driver's seat of his vehicle, with a single gunshot wound. There were no witnesses to the crime, and the murder weapon was never found. The lack of evidence, motive, and suspects made this case particularly challenging for investigators. Initially, the police explored the possibility of a personal motive, examining Johnston's background, relationships, and interactions. However, they found no evidence of conflicts, threats, or reasons why anyone would target him. Johnston was described by friends and family as a quiet, hard-working individual with no known enemies, making the motive for his murder even more perplexing. As discussed in the earlier entry, there's significant speculation that Don Devereaux was the intended target of this hit. Devereaux advised that his sources, including American and Israeli intelligence operatives, confirmed that the hit was meant for him. I'm going to say that this one will never be solved. This appears to be a very sad case of mistaken identity. The slaying of Jill Lynn Udo. In January 2001, the community of Syracuse, New York was shaken by the tragic loss of 18-year-old Jill Lynn Udo. Born on March 20th, 1982, Udo was an ambitious young woman, studying to become a paramedic while working at a local clothing store. Her life was cut short when she was found deceased in her apartment by her mother, Joanne Browning, a day after she failed to show up for a planned Super Bowl viewing with her family. This day marked the beginning of a long, unresolved investigation into her demise. Jill Lynn's apartment, located at 600 James Street, showed no signs of forced entry, and it appeared that nothing was stolen. The details surrounding the case suggest that the incident occurred in the early afternoon, with the assailant using one of Jill Lynn's own kitchen knives. Despite extensive investigations, interviews, and public appeals on national television shows, no suspects have been publicly identified, leaving the case unsolved to this day. The lack of closure has had a profound impact on Udo's family and the community. Joanne Browning, who passed away in 2007, dedicated her years following the incident to raising awareness and seeking justice for her daughter. The Syracuse Police Department continues to investigate the case, aided by advances in forensic technology and the dedication of cold case units. If you have any information pertaining to this case, please reach out to the Syracuse Police Department. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Also, once again, if you enjoy my content, please consider donating via Patreon or signing up for a YouTube membership. The topics I cover can lead to demonetization of my videos, and with your support, I can be less bound by self-censorship. Shout out to my patrons Noah Schubert, Kazakh Cutie, Kurt the Squirt, Monoxide Wendigo, Jeffer Metcalf, Z-Volts, and Director Delta. Also, big shout out to YouTube members Jordan All and Syntax Nexus. And also a huge shout out to every individual watcher and listener. I love you all so much, and you all make this possible. Until next time, stay safe and healthy. Peace out, everyone.